So with the time being 1:46 p.m., I will call the STRGBA GSA workshop number 5 to order. In attendance here from the GSA, starting from my left at the very end, got Darren Smallin from the city of Riverbank. Next to him is Jesse Franco from Modesto Irrigation District. Next to me, on my immediate left, is Tim Barahona with the city of Modesto. I am Eric Thorburn with Oakdale Irrigation District. To my right is Christy McKinnon with Stanislaus County, and at the far end there next to her is Jeff Roberts with the city of Oakdale. The city of Waterford will not be in attendance today. So this is a workshop with a focus on management actions. This is going to be an official board meeting as well because we do have a quorum. So item number 2, business from the public. At this time, interested persons are welcome to introduce any topic within the GSA's jurisdiction. Matters presented under this heading may be discussed, but no action will be taken by the GSA at this meeting. It's not required, but speakers may provide their name and address. Public comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Items not on the agenda. Anyone in the room? Anyone on the phone? Nope. All right, moving right along to item number 3. This is the draft groundwater use management program. This was posted online along with the agenda and the PowerPoint. So Dominic is here from Woodard & Curran, Dominic Amador, and he's going to lead this presentation. And we will hold questions to the end. I want to make sure we get through the presentation first before we start fielding questions. Go ahead, Dominic. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for joining us again this afternoon. It's my pleasure to be able to present this or continue the conversation and present the new material to you. I know we don't have a visual here, but I do believe we have some handouts in the back if anyone does not have a copy and would like it. Okay, so then diving on into page 2 here. Initially, I just want to kind of give you a brief overview of some of my goals today. First and foremost, this is a continuation of that conversation we had back in July related to the groundwater use management program. The overarching idea is that we heard a lot of really great feedback from many of you here. I'd like to kind of go over what some of our main primary takeaways are for that feedback, and then kind of go on to a revised management plan. Right, we took a lot of your comments, a lot of your questions, and tried to incorporate as much of that as possible into an updated plan. And then finally, we also have some additional new content, particularly related to implementation of this program and what we're looking at as far as getting the ball rolling over the next several years. Okay, so first and foremost, I predominantly wanted to say it again. Thank you all for your feedback. Thank you for your participation. It's really important that we have this stakeholder feedback process, and that way we can bring the best program that we can to the basin to make sure it serves all those that it affects. And so overall today, I just want to make sure that we know that we have a lot of great feedback. I only have so much time today, so I'm going to try to hit at least the main points verbally, but at least even if any particular topic that you may have had that is not kind of presented as an item on today's agenda, I definitely just want to make sure that I reiterate that they were certainly all read, internalized. We tried to take as much of them into account as possible, and so hopefully those are reflected in the formal plan itself. But due to kind of just time limitations for this afternoon, I'm going to really focus on 4 main points that we have. And also, just for reference, if whether your comments or if you're interested in anybody else's feedback that was provided, all those are publicly available. They are on the Sturgeon website. I provided a link that you can see kind of in your booklets, and so I encourage you all to kind of skim through those as you're interested. Okay, so as we kind of dive into it, one of the first main things that we want to look at is that we saw iterated multiple times as far as an item of feedback is really to focus on intrabasin collaboration, right? Particularly, we are a single GSA. There are a lot of growers, agencies, districts, management areas within this GSA, within the Modesto Subbasin. And we want to make sure that you know both that not just this workshop or the various GSA meetings, but we want to continue to promote collaboration, not just for today, but as we move forward into the future. And so with that, I want to just echo the idea that the GSA, the board members, and the stewards as members of the board, we plan to have a lot of continued conversation and collaboration as we move not only from the adoption of this plan, but as we move further into implementation, right? We know that these types of programs really affect a lot of people, and so we want to keep those doors of communication open. And so the goal is to make sure that everybody is working together to achieve an optimal solution. But particularly when it comes to implementation, to acknowledge that the stewards or the GSA board members are effectively going to lead a lot of the collaboration and the coordination with their individual management areas and the growers within those management areas. And so that will be continuing, and I would just encourage you to stay involved.
Okay. Hey, Dominic, as you move through the slides, just make sure they know where you're at in the room, because I don't think they can see unless they're online.
Okay.
Online can see, but the people in the room are just following by hard copy.
Cool. So then moving on to slide 5, looking at feedback topic number 2. This one particularly related to GSP projects. And so another item that was echoed several times from multiple different individuals is that the idea that both the stewards, the management areas, and the GSA ultimately really should prioritize bringing in supply-side solutions, right? Bringing in additional surface water, implementing projects as a means to achieve sustainability. And so for that, I wanted to continue to re-echo that the GSP does include a wide range of surface water supply projects. That is, our ultimate goal is to be able to achieve sustainability by implementing projects in a variety of ways. One of those particular ways, obviously, with the two surface water purveyors that we have within the basin is I just wanted to add the reminder that both MID and OID have programs in place. They're looking to expand those programs to be able to provide additional surface water to out-of-district users, both to supplement their supplies supplement their supplies at no impact to their current customers and in-district members. And ultimately, I want to make sure that we're attacking the idea of sustainability in a kind of a multi-pronged way. Obviously, we do want to continue to really push a lot of the projects that we have in the basin. But ultimately, as I've said before, is that we are required by the Department of Water Resources in the state of California to develop this management program as a backstop, effectively to, regardless of any uncertainties we have in the future, any hydrology and water supply systems, we have to make sure we have a tool in place to guarantee sustainability. And that's really the ultimate goal of this, is to supplement a project side solution. And so then moving on to kind of feedback item 3 that we have on your next slide is really the concept of management areas and the implementation of this program based on a sub-basin versus management area approach. And so one of the things you can see here, kind of the top 2 lines on this slide, really shows that we receive multiple feedback in multiple directions, right? And certainly as we look at implementing a groundwater use management program to the sub-basin, and others saying, hey, let's focus on the management areas. And so what we're attempting to do is have kind of a mixed approach to that. Ultimately, our goal is to assess and provide an allocation that is equitable to all users across the basin, right? And so that's why we have a very consistent volume, and I'll kind of go into those numbers later in the presentation. But we ultimately want to make sure that due to the variety of hydrology, water supply, land characteristics that we have, is that we want each management area to feel empowered to be able to manage their system in an optimal way that fits them and their users. And so because of that, we're going to do a combination. This is a sub-basin wide program. Water is distributed and allocated equitably across all users within the basin, but ultimately implementation will be driven by the management areas. All right, so then what I have here is feedback number 4, and really this slide is kind of a combination of a wide range of questions that we had during the feedback process. And certainly we want to make sure that we acknowledge that, there are a lot of facets to this program, especially as we move into implementation. And so we received a lot of comments about things like, well, what about drainage pumping? What about livestock usage, dispersed livestock usage, groundwater credits, banking, transfers, right? We have a lot of different aspects and details of this program. And so some of those, our goal is to be able to answer some of those questions today, but ultimately this is where I kind of take a step back to our previous slide in that our implementation program is going to be very heavily driven by the stewards of each of the management areas. And we want to make sure that they are afforded the flexibility to be able to fit their growers the most effective way that they can. And so because of that, the GSA is not planning on incorporating each and every one of these details, but plans to work with the stewards over time to make sure that there's programs that they can implement to achieve their sustainability goals. And finally, also want to actually continue to address is that given the timeline that we have for this program, we have committed to the state of California that we will have an approved program by January of 2026. That's in 2 short months. And so a lot of these details is we want to create the very framework of this program. We want to make sure that we have, kind of the overarching ideas and mechanisms built into it. But a lot of those details, as far as implementation goes, can be drafted throughout this next year. So as a summary of our overarching ideas for the feedback, again, we received a lot of really, really good, valuable feedback. And so first of all, I just, again, want to echo the thank you for providing it. It is invaluable, and it's, really goes as a testament to the support that we have within this basin. Again, really highlighting on a couple of the main takeaways that we have here is first and foremost being that we will continue to work and expand the collaborative nature of this program, the GSA working with their board members and the stewards, and then as we kind of expand that out to making sure that we are well educating the public and are continuously seeking that feedback as we move into the implementation period of this program. Again, we will focus on being able to implement this program, looking at management areas being the leaders of their respective areas. And ultimately, while we do have that idea that we want to achieve supply side solutions to this, this does have to be our backstop as dictated by the Department of Water Resources. And so that's the primary reason for the development of this program. Okay. So with that being said, I'll move in the next couple slides, really focusing on the allocation program itself. What are some of the numbers and details associated with it, and really ultimately how a lot of the feedback we received informed a revised program that we're presenting to you today. So I believe the first 3 slides, I think slides 10, 11, and 12 in the presentation are really focused on kind of a refresher, right? If in case any of you, it's been several months, in case any of you were unable to attend, I at least want to make sure I set the stage, because again, I want to take what we have in July and then inform you about where we stand today and how we tweaked the program. And so first and foremost, if you look at slide 10, this is really a very high-level summary of some of the information that we presented in July. There's a lot more information on that, so if you were not able to attend, I do believe it is on the Sturgeon website. There's a copy or kind of a YouTube video of that, and so there's a lot more detail on each of these decision points and policy decisions at that time. So overall, there are several different kind of policy decisions or management factors that have been taken by the GSA in the development of this program. And so, and what you can see here is a variety of what those decisions points are. We don't have all the time to kind of go into details of it, but at a very high level, the idea is that we are going to allocate groundwater production by looking at a sub-basin-wide distribution, predominantly focused on providing, there it goes, obviously providing that volume to the overall overlying area for particularly our agricultural users. And that and we have rules set aside as kind of special considerations for both de minimis and municipal users. And ultimately, as I kind of said earlier, we are going to have, so there's some general guidelines and rules for things like water accounting, trading credits, but that will be continued to be developed over the next year at the stewardship or management area level. Okay, so for those that were able to attend our last meeting, this should look fairly familiar. And so ultimately what we did back in July was be able to kind of put a lot of the different water uses and the characteristics of into each of these different buckets. So what you can kind of see here is what we started with on the left-hand side is the sustainable yield. This is what we assessed during the GSP development process as what is the volume of water that we have available for groundwater production in order to, and while still meeting our sustainability objectives. We start that number is about 267,000 acre feet. From there, you can see that we kind of effectively have to lop off the top 93,000 acre feet, and that goes into a combination of looking at developed supply and what we consider our special cases. That's predominantly our municipal and our de minimis or private domestic water use. Once we separate out that, we have what is called an allocatable yield. This is the volume of water we mean to disperse to each of the users and growers within the basin for their private use. And so that goal was to equitably distribute the 174,000 acre feet to a combination of overlying and appropriative users. So these are where we'll go through some revised numbers here momentarily, but I just wanted to make sure that we set the general framework to see where we were and then how that has been refined into today's conversation. Okay. So, and again, as a reminder, those numbers were then broken out not just by the sub-basin level, which is what the buckets were on the previous slide, but each of those were then broken, and the idea is they were broken up and distributed to each management area, dependent on the different use types and characteristics of their region. So again, since these are being heavily refined, I'm not going to go into the details here, but ultimately really focusing on kind of the right-hand side, the summary is the goal of this program is to be able to set forth a general guideline for groundwater use that can achieve and guarantee sustainability regardless of project side optimizations, but we intend for those projects to further offset this program. Okay, so then kind of now combining the past two sections, my goal is to look at some of what are the impacts of the feedback, comments, the recommended revisions that we have, and really how does that affect the program overall. And so again, not just myself, but each of the GSA board members, and particularly the Management Action Committee, has gone through all the feedback, and this is kind of these 5 items are really the main points for refinement that I'm going to go through kind of in detail here today. But at least at the highest level, I wanted to go kind of highlight each of these in that first and foremost, we want to make sure that we have a groundwater use management program, again, developed at the sub-basin level, equitable at the sub-basin level, but implemented at the management areas. In addition to that, we want to make sure we include all of the sub-basins developed supply in the calculations that we have. We want to make sure that we based on the feedback, we remove the non-municipal water supply, and that's kind of going to be used in tandem with the revisions to the sub-basins developed supply. Beyond that, we want to make sure that particularly when it comes to those special cases and municipal use, we want to make sure that we don't double count their allocation. So because of that, we are going to refine the use of an allocation by the overlying area. We want to make sure we're going to revise that to looking at the overlying area minus the municipal and domestic areas or the parcels. And ultimately, we're going to all have an updated slide to look at how we can evaluate opportunities for and really what would be the resulting impacts of looking at collaborative resource sharing across some of the different agencies. Okay, so then diving into some of those details. So first and foremost, we want to take a look at the developed supply within the basin. And so again, continuing as a refresher, I just want to make sure that to acknowledge that in general, California water law needs to make sure that we recognize that any water imported into the basin is considered a developed supply. Effectively in this basin, that means that both Modesto and Oakdale irrigation districts. They developed the reservoir system. They built conveyance networks to bring in and distribute surface water to their growers. That developed supply is owned and controlled by each of those respective districts. And so they are, and we want to make sure that we give them full credit for all that infrastructure and investment that they've put into this basin. And so one of the items, the last point here, is that they're, based on some of the feedback that we received post our July meeting, we came to the acknowledgement that we did not recognize the full volume of developed supply. We really focused on any of their losses related to their reservoir and conveyance seepage, and ultimately that they have the right as an imported water to recover beyond that and to include their recovery of their recovery of applied surface water as well. And so that's effectively what this slide is done. I've edited and updated kind of this yellow section here in the middle. And ultimately, though, the goal for our developed supply is really make sure that we acknowledge that the recovery of imported surface water also includes any form of percolation resulting from storage, which is the reservoirs, conveyance through their canals and pipelines, and any land application. So any percolation of water from each of those systems into the aquifer system is an import, and they have the right or the ability to recover that water. So if we want to take a look at what do those numbers look like, and first and foremost is looking at developed supplies kind of broken up into two respective districts. And what we're doing is leveraging the information that's available in their published agriculture groundwater management plans. And so, and making sure that we account for that full volume. And so overall, we can see that MID's operations include the deep percolation of applied surface water, reservoir seepage, canal seepage, as well as M&I seepage. And so this is actually one item, the last one you'll notice there's an item here that says pending. That's because we're working with the city of Modesto to make sure that we can assess any percolation or losses throughout their conveyance network through other pipelines to make sure that they also have credit as an additional, it's an imported surface water supply, so that they get credit for those losses as well. And so we're still working with them on that, but that'll be in the final plan as well. So for the Modesto irrigation districts developed supply, that total is at least pending, about 91,000 acre feet. Similarly, Oakdale irrigation district has a credit of about 31,600 acre feet from losses and return flows related to their surface water supply. Okay. So then continuing to move on, the next two major items here we have are related to the feedbacks, particularly acknowledging that unexercised overlying groundwater rights need to be protected. And this is kind of specifically related to undeveloped areas. As a landowner, they have an overlying right, even if they do not exercise that right? So if you own rangeland or any undeveloped area, you still want to make sure that we are providing them their overlying right to pump groundwater. And so we added some additional language to the plan to really reinforce that acknowledgement. In addition to that, we wanted to respond to the feedback that areas should not be able to receive both a municipal right to overlying use as well as providing a source from the municipality as well as their overlying use. This is predominantly going to be related to kind of if you own a parcel, like say in the city of Modesto, that we don't double count the city's water with your overlying right. And so because of that, we've removed that as a category. And so overall, our distribution across all overlying acreages, we're removing both the combination of municipal landowners as well as parcels that are limited to de minimis water use. And then finally, we've also removed, in kind of addition to those two major feedbacks and responding to those major feedback items, we are also removing the category of appropriative pumping. So that was particularly appropriative pumping from from the irrigation districts of Modesto and Oakdale. Given their ability to recover their developed supply, we decided to not grant them an allocation, although we will add the asterisks that from a water rights perspective that they may be able to claim that in the future. Okay, so what does our new bucket diagram look like? So at a sub-basin level, there's a couple major points that I want to make sure we certainly bring up. First and foremost, the easy one is to say that there's no longer a green bucket there, and that's the appropriative use bucket related to MID and OID's agency-based pumping, right? So those are the wells that each of the agencies operate and feed, where they feed groundwater into their surface water network, and they deliver that groundwater in that capacity. Overall, then you can see kind of the distribution here, particularly because of the extension of adding the percolation of applied surface waters and being able to provide a developed supply credit to that. You'll notice that the dark blue bucket here for MID and OID reflect the slide from 2 slides ago. And you see that, so that bucket is effectively a lot larger than it was previously. The purple bucket for special cases, municipal and de minimis use, that's the exact same. And then overlying use, again, as it relates to the allocatable yield, that is kind of where our resulting water supply goes to. And so if we want to break down each of these numbers and kind of explain really how that distribution works. So first and foremost, we are starting with the same sustainable yield number of 267,000 acre feet, but the volume that we kind of effectively lop off the top and provide to both the developed supply users and the special cases, that volume of 177,000 is significantly larger than it was before. And again, this is really a focus on the continuation of the water rights that each of those agencies have, and making sure that we recognize that developed supply. Which then brings us to about 95,000 acre feet of allocatable yield, and this is what we can distribute to the private landowners throughout the basin. And that for 95,000 is again focused entirely on overlying use in this case, which in practice is predominantly private agriculture. Okay, so then now taking a look at what does the overlying allocation look like at a sub-basin scale, and then how does that distribute to each of the management areas. And so, let's see, does it show my cursor? Yes, it does. Okay, so we start here at this 95,000 acre feet. Ultimately, the goal is to be able to provide a methodology to distribute that equitably across the entire sub-basin, regardless of the user. And so how that is done, again, similar to the previous slide, the allocatable yield is equivalent to the overlying allocation throughout the sub-basin to every parcel, to every user, regardless of their location or their use or anything like that. If you're so to apply to all parcels, what we do is we start with that sustainable yield, similar to what I went through on the previous slide. We subtract out the municipal, the de minimis use, and the developed supply, and that is effectively our allocatable yield. And so what we do starting at that 95,000 is we want to make sure that we distribute it equally across all of the management areas, and that's kind of this bottom right-hand equation that you're seeing here. So proportionally to the total area that you see for the allocatable acreage, that volume is then multiplied, or that ratio is then multiplied by the total sub-basin's overlying allocation and distributed to the management areas accordingly. So effectively what that means is, at least from an overlying allocation perspective for each of the management areas, the Modesto management area, at least in this, for this example, we start with an allocatable area of 78,200 acres, which is approximately, if we divide that 78,000 by 211, you can see that it's about 37% of the sub-basin overall, or at least a percent of the sub-basin non-urban areas. And so if we distribute that equally to that percentage, the Modesto area has about 35,300 acre feet of allocatable overlying use. Following that same methodology to the remaining 3 management areas, we can see that the Oakdale management area has an allocation of 23,000, non-district west 5,500, and the non-district east 31,700, each proportional to that overlying area, or that overlying non-urban area. Okay. So then, to give you an idea of what does the full picture look like when we look like as we assess the total allocation. So on the first, let's focus on the left-hand side. And so what you'll see here is this is actually the combination of all of the different allocation facets across each management area. And so similar to the previous slide, we can see that the total developed supply in the basin is 122,000 acre feet. That is distributed both to this MID and OID respectively. So you can see the 90,000 and the 31,000 on those two columns. Then when it comes to the special cases, this is again focused on the municipal and an estimate for de minimis use within each management area. And so in that case here, we can see 33,000 to the Modesto area, 8,900 to the Oakdale area, non-district west, 6,200, and no municipal use in the non-district east. On top of that, we also take the numbers from the previous slide, looking at the overlying allocation, so that 95,000 acre feet, also distributed to each of the different management areas, and ultimately providing the total allocation kind of highlighted in the light orange color here. That total allocation, again, coming back to that, coming back to that sustainable yield number of 267,000 acre feet to the subbasin. And we can see that the total allocation to each of the management areas includes about 160,000 to Modesto, 64,000 to Oakdale, 11,700 to the non-district west, and about 32,000 to the non-district east. So then for context, because I know not everybody may know every management area's total historical water use and allocation, and so what does that really mean for each of these areas? So in general, what you can see is that the next row we have here is the historical pumping. This is what we estimate the historical groundwater use to be within each of these management areas. Again, these estimates are a combination of land use, ET, water supply, irrigation management, soil parameters. There's a lot of information that kind of goes into this estimate, but again, these are not metered data. These are a modeled estimate for each of those areas. So, but for context, if we want to look at that, so we particularly want to take a look at what is the reduction required to achieve our sustainable conditions. And you can see that in general, the subbasin requires about 50,000 acre feet of reduced groundwater production. And you can see that distribution across each of the management areas below. So, and then finally on the last row here, you can see the total allocation as a percentage of the historical. And each of the management areas, Modesto, non-district west, and non-district east, if held to this particular outline, we can see that each of those three management areas would require a reduction overall to meet their sustainability goals. But we can also see that the Oakdale management area is in excess of their historical use. And so because of that, that's where we want to take that next step. And so for anybody that was involved in our last meeting, this is a form of optimization that we talked about, right? We certainly don't want to make sure that we don't want to harm realistically our local economy. We don't want to make sure that achieving these goals is as painless as possible. I understand that this is a kind of a challenging topic in general, but we do want to make sure that we take steps to really optimize the resources that we have and work together as a subbasin to make sure that we can achieve those goals, as well as possible. And so that's where we can see kind of the second table here. When I look at the kind of what we're calling this collaborative management table, is say, hey, what if we acknowledge that OID in particular has an allocation, once we include their developed supply, has an allocation in excess of the historical use. And so we want to make sure that we can redistribute that again to each of the growers throughout the basin. And so the overarching idea behind this is that we want to take their previous total allocation, compare that to their historical use. And we can see that in general, that the Oakdale area has about 24,000 acre feet of estimated an allocation in excess of their estimated surface or groundwater use. And the goal is to be able to redistribute some of that water, that 23,900 acre feet, that percentage of their developed supply, to the other areas, and ultimately mitigate as much of the reduction as we can. And so if you actually kind of go to the next slide, there's a kind of provides a little bit of additional detail as to the methodology behind that. And so so overall, though, we want to say that that first and foremost that this developed supply is currently claimed by and owned by each of the irrigation district as the importer of that water. And so But those agencies may be able to transfer some of that, the credit associated with that developed supply with the approval of the GSA. And so that's, in this example, that is the goal, is to be able to, again, reallocate some of that water. And so as an example to that, our goal is to be able to take all of that surplus of developed supply and redistribute it equitably. In this case, our goal is to redistribute it based on the remaining overlying area. So it's basically an area-weighted redistribution, and we make sure we provide that to the other management areas. So overall, though, the idea is that we want to temporarily reduce the demand reductions required, particularly in what we're considering phase one, or the first 5 years. I'll go more into implementation over the next couple of slides, but the goal is to, really offset as much of those reductions as possible in order to give ourselves time to further develop those projects, right? And that's where, again, come back to the idea that we want to continue to promote, to expand the surface water supply projects that we have within the basin, mitigate as much of this program as possible. But again, we need this as the backstop, and so at least in what we're considering phase one, OID has agreed to provide some of their developed supply to the remainder of the basin to offset this as much as possible. Okay. So then, really, I'm sure everybody's asking, so well, what does those numbers effectively mean, and what does the future look like? So first and foremost, before we kind of get into each of the areas, we just want to take a look at the GSA as a whole, the subbasin as a whole. And so the first thing I want to make sure that we really hit on or identify is that throughout the 2026, the GSA will be performing a periodic evaluation and a 5-year update of the GSP. And so this is a major step that we have to take every 5 years with Department of Water Resources to reevaluate the conditions within the basin. Basically take all the information that we've gained over the past 5 years through monitoring, through better measurements of our use, through additional hydrology and hydrogeological information that we have, compile all that data and revise the GSP. And so we want to make sure that we acknowledge that there are certainly additional data gaps that to be filled. We are continuing to do this, and that this program, at the groundwater use management program, will be informed by the GSP 5-year update, and there may be revisions to this program into the future. Okay, and so particularly that as we go through that process over the next year, when we will take a look at things like providing credits related to projects related to surface water supply. We will look into things like overall looking at banking, a potential trading program, but that's going to be a continuation throughout the next year. Then taking a little bit deeper dive, looking at each of the different management areas. So first and foremost, we want to, kind of going in order here, looking at the Modesto management area. So in general, we can see that overall, the groundwater levels are relatively stable throughout the Modesto management area, and that particularly with a calculated required reduction of about 1%, or actually a little bit under 1%. The overall idea is that that currently no action and no action plan will need to be developed. I'll go into what an action plan is in a second. But that the overall idea, being that we're there kind of on that threshold, that we will do continued monitoring to ensure no overdraft. And if that changes, then we will adaptively manage the basin and make any tweaks that we need to the program. When it comes to the non-district west, we also want to acknowledge that currently all the monitoring wells that we have both in and adjacent to the non-district west, water levels are stable, and water levels are above the measurable objectives. And again, and those are our objectives for Sigma both now and forecasted in the future. And so that given their groundwater level conditions and that our objectives for the GSP, we also foresee no action plan needing to be developed for the non-district west. When it comes to the Oakdale management area, we acknowledge that despite the fact that there's declining water levels due to the kind of the operational influence to the neighboring management areas, that in general, the Oakdale management area is still in surplus of its allocation. overall. And so because of that, because they're already meeting their allocation within this framework, that beyond that allocation, there are no additional action needs to be taken for them. And then finally, when it comes to the non-district east management area, we want to acknowledge that the groundwater levels are declining throughout the non-district east. And because of that, we want to make sure that we can have the ability to outline what a management plan is, and then we be able to make sure that we work with the stewards to implement that program. So before I get into what, from a policy development of like what an action plan is, what's the timeline and the phases that we're looking at, I really want to take a step in looking into the implementation schedule, particularly for the non-district east, acknowledging that that is where the bulk of the reduction requirement will have to take place. And so what we've done is we've broken this up into 3 independent phases. Effectively, we want to make sure that we give ourselves time both to bring projects online. We want to make sure that we provide planning horizons to growers to make sure they can make good management decisions for themselves and their farms. And so what we've done is we want to kind of ease into it, and we want to make sure that we hold things consistent for about a 5-year period, right? So that way individuals can plan for themselves over the near-term horizon. And so what we've done for that is broken up this implementation plan into 3 phases, as our goal is to overall achieve sustainability. And because we're about 5 years into the current plan, the goal is to break phase 1 down into the 5 years from 2027 to 2031. Then we'll break that beyond phase 2. We'll start in 2032, go to 2036, and then 2037 to 2041, which again is that is the combination of these 3 plus the past 5 years will cover the entire state mandated implementation period, that we were granted. We were granted 20 years to achieve sustainability by 2042 and to achieve our measurable objectives by that time frame. And so that's the goal is to plan through 2042, at which point we will determine a kind of revised values for that. So what you can see here is we've broken down that breakdown, that target of being 100% compliance with those targeted volumes. And we've broken that up into 3 categories, approximately 33 or 34%, 67%, and 100%, effectively just splitting it into thirds, right? Again, we wanted to mitigate as much of the challenge in meeting our objectives as possible, and also acknowledging that there are inherent uncertainties, whether it's modeling, whether it's hydrology, right? We want to make sure that we take a significant step forward. We have committed to DWR. We will take a significant step forward. We will completely mitigate all forms of overdraft by 2028. And so we need to take a big step forward. But again, we want to make sure we take a big but conservative step forward. We want to make sure that is an achievable objective while making meaningful progress. And so with that being said, the idea of this is to take kind of the targets from the previous slides, divide them into thirds, and incorporate those at each of these different milestones. And so phase 1, the one caveat that you'll see here is 34. Our target is 34% of the total allocation program with the redistribution of water. So we've have an agreement from OID to be able to provide, at least for phase 1, at least for those first 5 years, to be able to provide that redistribution of their developed supply to mitigate as much of the reduction required as possible. So overall, in that first time period, we'll see about 16,000 acre-feet of reduction. And then in phase 2 and phase 3, again, that redistribution is not accounted for here. But again, the goal is to be able to take those next 5 years throughout phase 1 and fill data gaps and implement projects, right? And hopefully we can mitigate as much of those numbers as possible. But if no actions are taken, to be able to hit the targets of 39 and 58,000 acre-feet of reduction, respectively. Okay. So as a summary, kind of before I dive into some of the implementation programs that we're proposing that the stewards enact, is overall, I guess I want to just continue to re-echo that at the end of the day, the development of a management program was mandated by the Department of Water Resources. Through our work with them, they basically said that regardless of our projects, we need that backstop. We need the ability to be able to say, regardless of efficacy, regardless of hydrology or operations, that we have something in place, a program in place that guarantees the basin's sustainability. And with that being said, again, our goal, we understand that the hardship that this puts on individuals, and we want to make sure that we continue to work towards the development of supply-side projects, and that we will continue to implement those and refine this program as they are implemented and as we are able to quantify their effectiveness. So overall, again, as I said a few minutes ago, we have committed to DWR to completely mitigate overdraft by 2028. And so if you kind of take a look at the graph here on the right-hand side, we have set a set of interim milestones for groundwater levels over that 20-year planning horizon. And what you can see here with interim milestone number 1, you can notice that this is the kind of the low point. Right now, we are in an overall decline in groundwater levels throughout the basin. Our goal is by 2028 to be able to say we are at the bottom. We have stopped our overdraft. At which point we need to make sure that we continue that and continue that trajectory, or reverse that trajectory, and be able to increase groundwater levels overall to both to interim milestones number 2 and 3, but ultimately achieve our measurable objectives and never exceed our measurable or our minimum thresholds. So then again, just to reiterate, again, we need a first meaningful step towards sustainability. That's that goal of saying, hey, we outline what our best estimate is using the best available science and data and tools that we have today. We set forth an overall estimate, which is the allocation targets. We need to take a meaningful step towards those targets, which is why we have outlined the goal of 33% between the years 2027 and 2031. And we want to make sure we really leverage in that ramping implementation period, that 33%, 67%, and then 100% overall, and refine those every 5 years, right? So with every phase, we want to go through a process where we, in line with the periodic evaluations, where we collect all the data that we have over the previous 5-year period. We test the effectiveness of this program in conjunction with any projects that we have, and we're able to revise these, as we move forward. But we do need to have at least a meaningful head in a meaningful direction starting today. And similar, I said, right, the idea is adaptive management. We know we're not perfect. There is uncertainty with projects, with the tools that we have, but the goal is to be able to leverage the information that we have, continue monitoring the basin, looking at measured data from the existing wells that we have, and to continue to refine these types of programs overall. Okay. So then jumping into kind of the third main block of today's conversation is to take a look at, well, what does implementation look like, right? So we've talked about a lot of the numbers and our goals and our targets. Well, how do we actually manage that? How do we do that? And so one of the first things we want to make sure we do is acknowledge that concept of adaptive management, and that pending program effectiveness, measured data, that there is going to be some adjustments being made overall. So as a continuation of our conversation related to response levels, what we've broken this step down is there's really 3 main statuses of the basin, right? First one is what we're calling response level 1. That's effectively where we are below our measurable objectives, and we need some level of correction. We either need to completely, as of today, we need to completely mitigate all overdraft within the basin and bring water levels back up to our desired levels. And so in response level 1, which is effectively where we are, we want to make sure that there is a program in place, right? Like that is the groundwater use management program is effectively active. This is our target that we're going to be hitting. But depending on those conditions, if water levels continue to decline, if pumping in any one of those management areas are exceeding their allocation in the groundwater use management program, effectively, what we're going to do is we're asking each of the stewards to come up with an action plan, or basically a plan to achieve their sustainability goals. Okay, so what the idea behind that is, again, we've really acknowledged that the stewards, as representatives of their respective management areas, they're going to know their constituents best, and they're going to be in the best shape to really be able to solve these problems in a way that really is most optimal for their individual growers. And so the goal is that over particularly the next 5-year period, we look to the stewards to come up with ways of, okay, well, what works for you and your growers to achieve sustainability, to continue that conversation, to work out the details of those plans, which I'll get into in a second, and then come back to the GSA and say, here's our plan. Here's our goal to achieve our sustainability targets. You can measure us against those targets, but this is what we're going to do over the next 5 years. If any of those stewards are unable to achieve the targets set forth by the groundwater use management program, either looking at observed data or by looking at their total groundwater use dynamics, if they fail to meet that commitment, then the responsibility would then elevate to this level 3, where effectively the GSA, as the regulatory agency, will develop and implement their action plan. So the goal, again, is to keep this as localized management as much as possible. This is a very similar dynamic to what the states, the way the state approaches SGMA, right? Is where kind of many of you may have heard kind of in other areas of the state, each of the GSAs or the subbasins are granted the kind of regulatory authority to achieve sustainability. If the GSA or subbasin does not meet their objectives, then responsibility comes to state board gets involved, right? And effectively, the state board will levy their own allocation program. They'll levy their own fees and things to that effect. And so the idea behind this is that we want to take that same methodology and apply it to another layer of local control and development. And so that is kind of the overall goal, is that we want to be able to provide that local control, that local management to each of the stewards. And then if for whatever reason they fail to meet those objectives, then the GSA will take control of that dynamic. Okay, so you may ask yourself, well, what does an action plan look like? What does it involve? And so overall, we've really kind of broken this up into kind of 3 main steps. The first and foremost is identify the need for an action plan. And so kind of what I alluded to a second ago is, in general, we already see ourselves in kind of that response level 2, particularly when it comes to the non-district east management area, in that the GSA identifies the need for the management area to develop an action plan. That action plan can be developed, or that decision will be made by a combination of things. First and foremost, we're looking at monitoring data and compliance with the existing groundwater use management program. So we'll look at it both from a supply and demand perspective, as well as looking at measured groundwater level information. So once the GSA has made that determination, we take a step into step 2 here, where effectively the stewards of each of the management areas will develop their own action plan and work with the GSA to identify their approach, their methodologies, and how they intend on achieving their goals. Ultimately, then that action plan will be formally submitted to the GSA, because the GSA is the regulatory authority. They're the ones that are kind of granted that authority by the state to be able to implement their sustainability objectives. And so that action plan will be submitted to the GSA. The GSA will formally approve that action plan, and then it will go into effect. And ultimately, then, as far as implementation of those action plans, there will be additional monitoring data will be provided as part of the annual report cycle. So again, this is the report that we provide to the Department of Water Resources every April. The goal is that those stewards will collect information and basically provide a status update to the GSA in the first quarter of every year, and to make sure that they're achieving their objectives, in which case the GSA will acknowledge, approve, recommend any refinements, and then ultimately submit that as part of our annual report. So then what goes into an action plan? So that's actually really broken into kind of five primary categories here. So the first one is similar to step one of kind of the previous breakdown that I had. So first, the idea is that we're going to identify any conditions. The GSA will identify any conditions that are appropriate, anything that they identify the need for an action plan, what it is that they're basing their decision on. And, the GSA will notify their stewards of the active response level that they're in and whether there's a need for an action plan, right? So that would be the GSA will identify the issue and be able to provide to the stewards either A, you're in response level 1, no need for an action plan, response level 2, the stewards need to develop an action plan, or response level 3 that the GSA is taking over and the GSA will develop that action plan. And so then during the development of the action plan process, the goal is to set achievable goals for implementation, identify and document what their effective actions will be, and ultimately work with the GSA, submit it for approval, and then continue to coordinate with the GSA on how they intend to implement the program, and ultimately what their objectives are. And so that action plan can take there can be a variety of potential actions. I'll go into some examples in a second, but ultimately we want to make sure that we can do things like we continue monitoring, right? So the GSA needs to know, how do you intend on implementing this program? Are we going to look at continue to look at groundwater level data, or how are you intending on assessing groundwater use, things to that effect? Again, ultimately the decisions on how they do that is up to the stewards, but that information needs to be submitted back to the GSA. And then ultimately, we'll provide a schedule similar to how we have phases 1, 2, and 3 here. As we implement this program, the goal is to allow the stewards to develop a schedule that works for them. As long as they're within the framework of the groundwater use program that the GSA sets, they have some flexibility in schedule implementation for different projects management actions within their management area. And then ultimately, there will be a set of kind of reporting requirements. This goes in line with the schedule and monitoring. Ultimately, though, we just need to make sure that the stewards can be able to provide really what actions have they taken, right? What actions have they taken? What are the conditions, and how are things being operated, right? They need to be able to have measurable targets that they hit dependent on what actions they want to take. And so the goal is though just to compile all this information and be able to provide that to the GSA that says, hey, we're making meaningful progress towards sustainability, and here's how we're doing it. Okay, so then you may ask yourself, well, what are some of these potential actions? What do you expect to be done in order to achieve sustainability? And so what I have here is a list of 10 potential actions. This is not a comprehensive list. And I actually encourage each of the stewards and the growers and anybody involved with needing to develop an action plan to think creatively and to work together to determine how you can achieve this overall sustainability. This is just a list of examples of things that we see that are very common both throughout kind of the region, throughout the rest of the state, different potential actions that we see being implemented by other areas who need to leverage this type of a program and achieve their demand reductions. And so again, to kind of echo what I've said over the past few slides, right? The goal of this is kind of a list of high-level programs, some potential things to do, but ultimately the details associated with them will be, can be dictated by the stewards and the growers that are within their management areas. And so overall, though, just to kind of give you an example, I'm not going to go over these, but there is a variety of potential options for each of these for a action plan, right? We can have continued monitoring. We can both for groundwater, expanded groundwater level monitoring, groundwater use monitoring, whether in the form of remote sensing or direct metering. We can look, in order to achieve the desired demand reductions, there's tools we can look at fees. There can be credits associated with implementations of projects and potential recharge for those that are participating in those programs. Banking credits, transfers, right? These are all types of things that we just want to make sure that the stewards are, really to have the most control on what those finite details are. And so there's a lot of options here. We just want to make sure that the stewards have a starting point as to what some of those options are, and then can leverage some of the details around them to really fit their needs in their region. Okay, so just a couple more slides, and so really taking a shift in, what does this look like over the immediate time horizon, and particularly as it relates to both phases and even the near term, right? What our overall arcing goal, you'll notice here, we're kind of at the end of 2025. And we have been developing the groundwater use management program at a high level. The goal is to be able to adopt that by January of this next year. And so that's why you can see the goal is the next step beyond today is to adopt the groundwater use management program and to adopt the acknowledgement of where we're standing as far as part of phase one. Similarly, as I said earlier, over this next year, we're going to be revising the GSP. We have a periodic evaluation due to DWR, and with that includes an update to the GSP. Again, we've learned a lot in the past 5 years. We're going to fine-tune some of those numbers, fine-tune the characterization of the basin overall, and we will submit a revised GSP and a periodic evaluation to DWR in the very beginning of 2027. In line with 2027, that's when we see the groundwater use management program and phase one reductions begin, right? So we have about a year until those reductions will have to kick in. And so that, again, that's about a 5-year process. You can see that in here, 2027 to 2032 is throughout that entire period, we are going to really focus on kind of this specific set of numbers. We have targets for phase one projects and implementation. The idea is that particularly in this case, we're going to allow the non-district east stewards to work with their growers to develop a program that works for them to develop that action plan and implement it over the next 5 years. But as I said earlier, this is an adaptive management program, right? So our goal is that those numbers are set for 5 years. We want to make sure that the management area and the stewards know what numbers they're targeting. And we also we want to make sure our growers have, some certainty with their long-term planning, right? How are they, what plants are they cropping and what crops are we planting? And, how they plan to manage their individual parcels. We want to make sure that they have some level of rigidity to that. And so because of that, we set that 5-year target. But once we hit about 2030, 2 years prior to phase two, our goal is to, again, compile all the additional data that we've learned over the next several years and to refine this program. Hopefully by that time, we have several projects in place. We have additional surface water. We have implementation of those projects active. We're bringing additional surface water into the system, and we have additional knowledge on the efficacy of this program. Hopefully by that point, we've definitely arrested overdressed, and we're heading up. I would love nothing more than to be able to say that we erred on the side of caution and we get to reduce the reductions that we have. We get to pull back on some of those targets. And so the goal is throughout the year 2030, the goal is to revise this program in 2031 to submit a revised targets and revised program ultimately for phase two, which will also coincide with, again, similar thing. We have the next periodic evaluation and GSP update, and so that will be developed and submitted to DWR by 2032, when the implementation phase two implementation will begin. Okay, so then in the immediate horizon, right? So we took a look at the next 7-8 years or so. In the immediate horizon, our goal is to ultimately approve this program. And so what I have here is kind of a general stepwise path to GSA approval. And so right now we're actually on the second bullet already. On November 7th, a little under 10 days ago, we provided the draft plan for public comment and for review. And we've provided that in anticipation of this conversation. And we hope that based on that, we hope you, again, also provide additional feedback. We heard you last time. We made a couple tweaks to the program based on that feedback. And we're looking for something similar here. Obviously, the timeline is much tighter at this point. And so, but we are open to any fine tuning. We'll address your comments, and then ultimately that public comment period ends in about 2 weeks. So we ask that if you do have any formal written comments and feedback, that you provide it within that next 2-week period. And then ultimately that will go to each of the GSA agencies they'll have a copy of the final plan. They will review it, and ultimately this program will go on January 14th. It is anticipated that this program will go at the January 14th GSA board meeting, that they will aim to adopt this program at that time. Then moving forward into 2026, we understand that there's never a dull moment. We are always moving forward, and so we want to make sure that we continue to maintain that forward progress. We address some of the additional data gaps right throughout this process and throughout the feedback that you've provided. We've had a lot of great conversations with folks, and we've acknowledged that there are certainly data gaps within the basin. Right, there are monitoring. There's water supply dynamics that we're hoping to improve, refine. We're going to continue to address some of those data gaps, fill them as much as we can in the immediate horizon, and be able to manage the basin to the best of our ability. And so throughout this, in that period, starting actually already started, but we had the 2025 annual report that is again due April 1st. And then throughout that entire process, both now and into most of next year, across most of next year, again, we'll come back to that periodic evaluation that I mentioned a couple of times, that 5-year update. We'll be revising the GSP, taking this information, building it into that report, presenting this to DWR, making sure that we fill several other data gaps and address the corrective actions that DWR has asked the basin to do. And ultimately, by the end of that year, end of next year, we will have a finalized periodic evaluation and GSP update. And so the very, very beginning of 2027, again, GSA hopes to adopt the revised GSP, and we'll submit that to DWR at that time. I think that's it. There you go. Yeah, thank you. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Dominic. So with that, I will open it up to member agency comments or questions before going to public.
I have some comments. I just wanted to reiterate that the Department of Environmental Resources wants to thank all of our stakeholders for your contribution and participation in this process to develop these management actions for the subbasin, and let you know that we understand that each of you in your business and whoever or whatever you represent is very valuable to our community. Local control and sustainable management of our resources goes hand in hand with ensuring the agricultural viability and the public health of our community thrives. The GSA and the Department of Environmental Resources and all beneficial users of groundwater are facing some tough decisions to make. This has been challenging, but it's also an opportunity to put our best foot forward, and that is what I sincerely believe we are doing today. This program has been refined with consideration of the feedback received from various diverse water users, and the GSA and the Department of Environmental Resources want to continue to encourage supply-side projects over demand reduction, and we want to remind everyone that the programs will be adopted. This will just be the beginning, and that conditions and opportunities may change in the future as projects come on board and more data is obtained. This is a robust and equitable start, and it will demonstrate to the state that the subbasin will achieve its sustainability goals. I also want to thank our brilliant consultant team and dedicated partner agencies. More thanks to the Modesto Irrigation District and Oakdale Irrigation District for their outstanding leadership and for developing and building projects that will benefit our subbasin as a whole, and for your flexibility and willingness to collaborate so that these projects and the optimization of water resources will greatly benefit other management areas, the non-district east and the non-district west. We're so lucky to have such great partners, and I look forward to a positive relationship as we continue to progress and evaluate opportunities for now and for the future. Thanks.
Thanks, Chrissy. Who else? No? Okay, I have just a couple things. So slide 16, can you go back to slide 16? So the pending there, the municipal and industrial seepage, we talked about in the future, coming up with that number. When you talk about in the future, that's actually going to be potentially in the next update, not in these numbers for the first 5 years. Is that correct?
So our goal would be to work with the city of Modesto to develop those in the next week and ideally put them into the plan, into the final version of the plan. So right now, the public draft is available for review, and those numbers are kind of as presented here. We're hoping to be able to incorporate those small adjustment to those numbers for the final iteration.
Yeah, it's not expected to be a huge number, but a number nonetheless. Okay. Thank you. Slide 20. So the developed supply there, is there any part of that developed supply that should be riparian, a riparian component, I guess? I thought there was some riparian use in the non-district west?
So there is riparian use. Developed supply needs to be an import into the basin, and so that's particularly driven by the reservoirs and the conveyance that we have bringing water into the basin. And then in addition to that, if there is active infrastructure for any riparian use, we would need to be able to work with them to be able to provide estimates for seepage effectively.
Yeah. Again, a small number, but something that maybe we can work on if we need to there. Next slide, if you would. Okay, so I just want to emphasize when we're talking about in discussing the proposed temporary redistribution, OID's agreed in concept to present it this way. Formal approval is still required, so I still need to go to my board and get a formal approval on that. But it is presented that way in the draft, and we're okay with that. 23. So another just emphasis here for everyone. Phase 1 is what is proposed in this plan. So that 34% reduction, which is around 16,000 acre feet, or 16,000 acre feet is proposed currently. Phase 2 and Phase 3 would be refined and revisited in future updates of the groundwater use management program. Okay, that's it for me. I will open it up to the public. We'll start with anybody here in the room who would like to make a public comment. Jennifer's got a mic, so just to make sure that people online can hear you, on the phone can hear you, please utilize the microphone.
Thank you. Lots to argue about here. We've been doing it for a while, but there's a couple major points that I'd like to address. John Duarte, MID user, as well as OID out-of-district user. And I got to compliment OID. OID's been stepping up. Today they're stepping up, allocating some unused capacity. They've been working great with the out-of-district growers. I appreciate it. We're getting our project in, and we need to recognize that. I hope MID catches up, just to put a tiny snark in there. We're allocating 42,300 acre feet to the out-of-district, North District East grower area. Now, in that area, there's 71,000 acres of land total, and all the estimates I've heard center around 27,000 acres of actual irrigated farmland out in the North District East. As I read this, we're allocating 42,000 acre feet across the entire 71,000 acres. And so if we do that, we end up with 0.6 acre foot per acre. I think my math is okay. If we allocate it to the 27,000 actually developed, farmed, and irrigated acres that actually drive the economy here in the county, we end up with 1.55 acre feet. In 2014, maybe it was 15, the county put through a well ordinance that restricted drilling of new wells outside the district boundaries. And so no one outside the irrigation district in North District East that isn't currently farming orchards and vineyards can even go put in a well and put in orchards or vineyards. So I'd strongly advise, please reconsider, allocate that 42,000 acre feet to the currently farmed acreage, at least for the first year or two. And then if someone can show actual beneficial use of groundwater out there on the rangeland or whether they haven't been irrigating historically, spread that allocation out to whatever the newly irrigated acres are. Don't restrict anyone's ability by virtue of this process to put in orchards or vineyards. They're going to have other hindrances, banks, the county, the well ordinance. But if you don't do this, and that would still cut out of district, North District East growers down to 1.55 acre feet per year, but it wouldn't cut us down to 0.6 acre feet per year and let all that other water go orphaned and unused, all that other allocation. So, and I don't see here any ready trading program that would allow the recipients of those water, groundwater users to transact it to growers who actually want to use that water on their farms and pay them something for it. So if you evolve this more slowly, that can start to happen. But if you do this now, you're definitely going to cut North District East water consumption, because you're going to make these properties unbankable in the very near term. And it's going to have a very harsh economic effect on the county. You can get there by starting off with allocating that water to current irrigated cropland, then move it, spread it out to those who can show beneficial or irrigated cropland use of it later, which I think is going to be very difficult for other policy reasons. So that's my biggest thing. We'll stick with that. Thank you.
Dominic, did you want to clarify that a little bit in response to that, just to help?
So the only other thing I want to target is kind of, we discussed it a little bit at our last workshop, but ultimately the goal is to be able to provide the 42,100 acre feet to the management area, at which point, to coincide with their action plan, the goal would be that the stewards would be able to implement however they want, right? We want to be able to give them that flexibility. And so that was, I believe we discussed that explicit dynamic a little bit last time, being able to provide this allocation to the management area. The management area would get to distribute that water however they want. I believe the county spoke up at the time suggesting that was a reasonable path forward, was to be able to allocate their bucket of water to only the irrigated acreage. But I believe the formality of that would have to be decided at the stewardship level.
When will the allocation take place in restricted groundwater pumping in the North District East?
Beginning in 2027.
Sure. Thank you for that answer. The question is just, how do we get there fast enough? When will that allocation take place, and when will the restrictions down to 42,200 acre feet for the entire North District East area happen? And of course, the next question is going to be, who decides the stewards? Because whoever goes on that committee, it's going to be a big political wrangle to decide how that groundwater allocation is distributed.
So there's two steps to that. So the first is that phase one of this program begins in 2027. So the beginning of so we have a full year until this program is implemented. On top of that, I would just remind you that the phase one allocations are significantly less restrictive. The ones that begin in 2027 are less restrictive than the total 41,000 by the tune about 30,000 approximately. And so then the implementation of that, though, would be left to the stewards. Now, the head of the steward is the governing agency on the GSA board. So in the non-district east, that's Stanislaus County. Exactly whom they elect or decide to have on their on a committee to implement this program, I think would be up to them. The goal is they would have about a year to develop the details of that program. Then.
Anyone else here in the room?
Yeah, good afternoon, Anthony Ratto, Ratto Brothers. One question is, the county is going to be stewards in two distinct areas, and I wanted to just make sure that the county recognizes that they can have different tools and different approaches in each area, as the challenges are quite diverse. I'd also like to comment on, I think this also falls back to Mr. Duarte and his timeline. I haven't been overly impressed with the county's outreach over the last year, 2 years, as far as the non-district west is concerned. And so there's room for improvement there. And I think that, the non-district east is going to need outreach quick and be communicated more so than less so. So there's my comments. And then one other question, is OID looking to charge for this potential developed supply that you're dispersing within the other management areas as you go to your board for formal approval? And then has MID discussed charging for their developed supply that is being pumped out of the ground up near Modesto Reservoir? And where does that look going forward? So thank you.
Just to answer, for OID, we haven't made any decisions beyond even the first 5 years. We still need to get board action in the first 5 years, and beyond that, we haven't taken any action or provided any direction. But it's a good question. It's something we'll need to consider.
Hi, good afternoon, Stacy Henderson. Thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that Modesto Irrigation District's long-term groundwater replenishment program is in the process of being revamped. So I'm not sure if all of you that are listening or in attendance were aware that that's happening. Significant improvements are being made to the contract to make sure that it's very clear what is being offered and what the rights and responsibilities are of MID and of the participants. There's been public outreach with respect to a workshop that we just had. Was that last week or yesterday? I don't even know what day that was now. Last week. And they're continuing to take comments on that. So go ahead and check that out if you're interested in that. I think that our goal has always been to just make sure that you don't have to minimize the acreage that's being farmed in the non-district east. We want everybody to be productive and profitable, and in order to do that, there are resources out there. So the long-term groundwater replenishment program that MID has is a really good resource, similar to OID's program, very similar actually. So hopefully people will take advantage of that. I did have a couple questions about the action plan. So the management area action plan, I understand, is going to be implemented for the non-district east at this point, right? Chrissy's saying yes. Okay, great. And then I hear a lot of this is like the stewards have the discretion to decide these things, which is fine, but I'm curious about how the general public and the rest of the GSA are going to be made aware of what stewards are doing. Do you guys report monthly about what you're doing, or how are we going to know what's going on with the stewards?
So we don't speak to it specifically, how often it needs to happen, but we do say in the plan that it needs to happen. Mm-hmm. It needs to come back to the GSA and have formal approval, that action plan. So we kind of left it vague to leave ourselves a little bit of room there. I think initially we'll probably be talking a lot more, and as things, there'll probably be a gap there, and then I would envision having to talk a lot more as the formal approval process happens. So it'll vary.
And then another question similar is, once the action plan is actually approved and it's being implemented, and then you're trying to determine whether or not it's being implemented successfully and there are reductions that are being made, I'm just again curious if there's any sort of specific reporting plan, like, hey, we are making progress towards this goal or we're not, because there are some reference to, I think it was said like other management actions or something like that in the proposed plan, and it's very vague as to what that could include. I see that there's a lot of options you guys have, which I think is fantastic. I just want to make sure that we're all aware of how that progress is being made and we're not waiting for the 5-year update or the 2-year update or whatever.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
So the groundwater use management plan is the first action that will be implemented. And then if we don't hit our goals, so if we don't arrest the overdraft or we don't accomplish our allocated allocations and our reductions, that's when another action plan will have to be implemented. And the GSA will tell the management area steward, hey, you guys aren't doing what you need to do, you need to come up with an action plan. And then the steward will work with the landowners and groundwater pumpers to figure out what the action plan is going to look like, and then that's going to go back to the GSA for approval. So that's the way it's set up. And then if that doesn't work, if we don't get compliance with the action plan and the groundwater use management program requirements, then the third activity will be that the GSA will take over as steward.
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear, because in slide 22 and in the report that was sent out last week, it says that the non-district east management area stewards will implement an action plan to meet the current GW UMP objectives. So an action plan is being implemented now before 2027, right?
That's a good question. So what will happen is, once we have approval of our management action program, then we're going to get to work with building the program within the non-district east management area. And then that will eventually go to the GSA for approval. So that is, I guess, the first action of the groundwater use management plan, which is the program and the framework outlining the responsibilities and the activities will be required under the framework.
Okay, so I'm totally not trying to be picky, but you're using different words than what are in here, so I want to make sure that we understand. So when you're saying that you're going to be developing a program and things like that, it says in the documents that we've been provided with so far that there's a management area action plan that needs to be prepared for the non-district east, which will be approved by the GSA. So that's happening now, as soon as this is adopted, right? We're not waiting till 2027 to create a management area action plan for the non-district east?
Dominic, can you clarify the language in the
Thank you.
draft program?
So our goal is to have the overarching framework adopted in the middle of January of this upcoming year. Part of that plan will be to identify the non-district east as having needed to create an action plan. Throughout the 2026 year, the non-district east or the stewards through the non-district east will develop that plan that fits their area. And then by the end of 2026, they have to submit that plan to the GSA for approval. And so their action plan will coincide with the beginning of phase one, which starts in 2027.
Okay, perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to make sure, that we aren't waiting till 2027 to start developing a plan, because then I think it's a disservice to the non-district east, who then has a shorter period of time to implement whatever's required by the plan, and we want to give them as much time as possible. So I think that's all the questions I had right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The reporting too, just to clarify, the action plan content, the reporting is part of that, so. Yeah. And then we'll also be looking and assessing that and getting updates on that through the annual reporting process. Anyone else in the room? No? Anyone on the phone? Jennifer?
Yes.
William Fogarty.
Hello, this is William Fogarty. I'm a landowner and I run rangeland that does not use any groundwater, and then I have irrigated pasture. And the state of California makes us, we have 2 ponds on our range ground. And so we have to monitor how much water begins the year and ends the year on a water-based year. And 10 acres, we have one small pond that's 10 acre feet. And by the 1st of October, it's down to holding 5 acres of water. There's no cattle on that all summer long. And on the big pond, there's 50 acres of water, but it has a surface area of by the end of the beginning of October, the new water year, it is down to 20 acre feet of capacity. And so I did not see in any of these graphs, the MID and the Oakdale Irrigation District have an extensive canal system and water storage system. I don't see anything in there for last evaporation. And I'm sure that that's going to be, your developed water is almost going to be at least 30% at least, maybe close to 50%. So I'd like to see that addressed, please.
Mr. Fogarty, it's really hard to hear you. You're breaking up. I heard that you, Oakdale Irrigation District and MID have an extensive canal system. Can you repeat that part?
Yeah, we have an extensive canal system, and we have reservoirs. And so I never see out of your development plan how that your evaporation rate is from your total supply, how that is subtracted. So you're losing quite a bit of water just to evaporation, even in the canals. You still don't lose. There's still evaporation that moves down to Oakdale.
All right, Mr.
Oakdale.
Fogarty, we can't make out what you're saying completely. Maybe we can talk again offline, or if you can get another connection. But we're having trouble making out what you're saying, unfortunately. You want to come back to him, maybe? Do we have anybody else on the phone? Nobody else on the phone? Okay. Yeah, do you want to try and call back, Mr. Fogarty?
Well, I'm online, so
Yeah, it's almost like you're speaking maybe too close to the phone or too close to a microphone is what it kind of sounds like you're almost.
Well, I did not see anything in there that brings into the evaporation rate from the MIT.
Yeah, it sounded like he wants to reduce, account for the evaporation rate.
Sure. So I admittedly only heard part of that, but at least if your question is addressing or as asking if we are accounting for the evaporation rate between the surface water systems, both the reservoir and the conveyance networks of MID and OID. So short answer to that is yes, we are taking into account that the data is also documented in the ag water management plans of both districts. But those losses are not recoverable because that does not reach the groundwater system. And so effectively just for clarity, the developed supply is a return flow or water that is seeped into the aquifer system and is to be able to be recovered from that aquifer system. Evaporation losses are lost to the air, so we unfortunately don't have access to any of that water. And so while it is accounted for, and we, in both this modeling and with the water budget modeling done for the ag water management plan, evaporative losses don't come into play in the groundwater use management program. So I hope that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to follow up with you, or maybe you can try typing it in, and maybe they can pick it up that way.
That's a good idea. Thanks, Dominic. No more hand raised? Okay. All right. Last chance. Anybody else in the room? Sure.
Eric, thank you. Thank you guys all for what you're doing. This is no fun, I know. But good stuff that you're doing here, Dominic. Thank you. Just procedurally, I just want to make sure I understand. Sorry, Terry Withrow. I'm an accountant here in town, CPA here in town, and I'm also on the Board of Supervisors. So the GSP was approved by all of your respective agencies, right, initially? So that's happened, and we're past that point. Then I just want to make sure with regard to the management plan, does that go back to your respective agencies also for approval by each of you? Or, because I'm just looking at the timeline we're talking about here, does that happen or does it not? Does that have to go back to your respective agencies?
It hasn't happened yet. It should be happening now.
Okay, but
this is the time to comment on this plan.
Got it.
And so that's the well mitigation plan and this GWUMP. I like to say GUMP. But both of those will go back to our individual member agencies, and we would all, as staff, get direction from our councils and boards on what action to take at the GSA meeting in January.
Okay, but not before the January 14th
Correct.
deadline. After.
The January 14th would be the meeting that the GSA would hopefully be taking action on both of those plans and improving them.
So then your respective agencies will have to have approved those prior to then, right?
Yeah, it kind of depends on their processes.
Okay,
As long as staff has direction, whether it's through formal action of their agency or however they need to get
Okay,
that.
just want to, yeah, so it does have to go back to respective agencies and they'll do that. Okay. And then with regard to the stewards, so the stewards for the non-district east and the non-district west that we've talked about here will be the county, will be Christie, and she'll get her direction from the Board of Supervisors as we work with the non-district east and non-district west to implement and come up with these plans.
Except in the non-district west, you also have one more steward, which would be the city of Riverbank.
I'm sorry, which will be
The
here?
city of Riverbank is
Okay.
also in the non-district west.
Perfect, okay. Okay, good, that's all I needed. Thank you guys again for all you're doing.
Anyone else? All right, great questions. Nice job, Dominic. Thank you very much. So as we were able to clarify there a little bit with Mr. Withrow, County Board of Supervisor, Mr. Withrow, we need to make sure that all the member agency representatives are ready to go come January 14th. If there is any information you need from me or any help you need from me, please don't hesitate to ask. In the meantime, I'd like to coordinate and make sure that we all understand what meetings we're going to get that approval and have those discussions independently. So we're ready to go on the 14th. So I will be sending out some emails to kind of get some feedback from you all. In addition to City of Waterford here, I'll talk to Mike. Both documents are available online. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to see the new website that's up and running and it looks good. It's been working well in my own experience. I haven't heard otherwise, but any feedback or suggestions on that are greatly appreciated. So now we've got the draft well mitigation plan and this draft of the groundwater use management program are available online. We've also got the PowerPoints, the recorded workshop from the well mitigation plan, and then this workshop was recorded and will be posted in the near future. So utilize those as potential resources in getting to the January date of consideration for approval of both of these plans. All right, so moving on to item number 4, the next meeting. So that will potentially be our regularly scheduled GSA meeting on December 10th, pending any essential business items. Otherwise, January 14th would be our next meeting if that were to be canceled. In the near future, we will need to talk about some progress and anticipated deadlines for the periodic report and GSP update is going to be happening here quickly. Also, today in your email, each member agency should have received an email from Dominic requesting data for the 2025 annual report. That data is due back to Dominic by the 31st of December. Keep an eye out for that. That is all I have. I basically went from the next meeting to committee comments, so I apologize. Any comments on the next meeting from the member agencies? Comments, questions?
I don't have a comment about that, but I do have a question about the stewards. Maybe I should know more than this, but how are the stewards going to be chosen? Have we
They're already designated from the member agencies.
Okay,
It just depends on what management area you fall in.
okay.
Yeah. And that's shown in the groundwater use management program. There's a table that shows you what stewards are in each management area as well. Yeah. Next meeting, no comments, questions from the member agencies? Comments, questions about the next meeting from the public? Anybody online? No? Okay. So that wraps up item number 4. Item number 5 were committee comments, reports, which I basically did on my own. So I'll let anybody else that has any committee comments or reports.
Would like to mention from MID, as Stacy mentioned earlier, that MID is actively looking at revising the groundwater replenishment program. We did have a board item that was, or a workshop rather, that was presented last week. Some really good comments, good attendance to help with input with respect to that program, and I know our board is anxious to get that moving, especially with the upcoming irrigation season. So we just want to let basically the public know that that is being revised. Also, I just would like to acknowledge just several acknowledgements. One to OID. I know they are agreeing in concept to this groundwater use management program and being willing to offer up, so to speak, some groundwater allocation. So I just think that that's a positive demonstration of their partnership, this ongoing partnership. They've been, I think, pretty consistent in leadership, so thank you, OID, for that. I think the other acknowledgement is our consultants. They've done a great job just keeping us on schedule. I think we've had some major, I think, discussions and decisions that have had to be made, and two critical programs that have had to be put together, I think, from ground up. So thank you to Dominic on the water current side of things, and then Liz Elliott on the well mitigation plan. Both have done a really good job with that. We have some difficult decisions ahead of us, and this is, I think, just been played out. I think we all start to realize just on the data that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, that we've tried to be strategic in outlining what needs to happen within the respective steward areas or management areas and then the stewards. And we've also tried to provide, I think, that flexibility within those management areas to take a look at what those circumstances are within those respective management areas to figure out what solutions are going to best suit those areas. And so I think we've done so with the intent to provide the framework, the guidance, the standard. I think we're all looking at the next step is we do want to see accountability. We do want to see consistency. We do want to see partnership. And that's all going to take some time to actually develop. But again, I just want to thank the respective agencies here that have just contributed, and then our consultants, and obviously our public that have continued, and customers that have continued to provide feedback, input. Thank you so much.
Well put. Thanks, Jesse. Anyone else? No?
So that December 2nd deadline for comments applies to both drafts or just this one?
Just this.
Okay. The other one already
Yeah,
passed.
the other
Okay.
comment period passed. So we've got a final draft, if you will, of the well mitigation plan that's ready now.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. All right, thank you, everybody, for your participation. Appreciate it. And look forward to getting this rolling, and it's just the start, so stay with us. Thank you. Have a great night.